Welcome to your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Good show coming up today. Chip Scoggins will be on in just a little bit, columnist at the Star Tribune, talking about his Football Across Minnesota column that went live not too long ago, and talking some Gophers, some Wild, some Timberwolves. Lots to catch up on there with Chip. It's been a little while since he was on the show, so looking forward to that conversation. Wild played on Tuesday night, got a nice win at Vancouver, a good bounce back. So they are 5-1 now on the season. Chip and I talked a little bit about the Wild and about the Wolves, who have a big game Wednesday night in Milwaukee. So plenty to get to there, including a little bit of World Series talk as well. I'm going to end with a recruiting item that I thought was interesting about Gophers women's basketball. But first, what did I miss? Well, I did a list on Tuesday of the top 25 players in Timberwolves history, and I thought, I blogged about it, but maybe I could share some thoughts on the podcast as well. There's been a lot of, the NBA put out its list of 75 best players in league history, as part of their 75 years in the league, and so people have been putting together Wolves lists of top 75. Once you get to 75 with a franchise that hasn't had a ton of success, it gets a little bit bleak. So I decided to do 25. I thought 25, most of the players, at least you're going to be on the list, you're like, okay, that guy contributed to the Wolves. He made a positive, meaningful contribution to this team. So here are my top 25 players in Timberwolves history in reverse chronological order. 25, Zach LaVine. He probably didn't get his full due here because he got traded before he got really good, but he was starting to show what he could do in that year, 2016-17, before he got injured. 24, Fred Hoiberg. I was surprised. He didn't play a ton, only a couple of years, and he was primarily a role player off the bench, but man, he shows up on a couple of real interesting lists. He has the best career offensive rating in Wolves history, 128.2, and the sixth best defensive rating, 102.3. Fred Hoiberg in limited action was very good for the Wolves. 23, Doug West, kind of one of longevity here than anything, but he was a key player for them for a long time. 22, Anthony Peeler, traded by the Wolves, traded for Doug West. Traded Doug West for Anthony Peeler. Let me get that right. And brought some toughness, some shooting to the playoffs. 21, Corey Brewer. Only guy I've played golf with on the list, so 21 for Corey Brewer. High motor. Good player. Solid player. He could help a good team. 20, Gorgie Jang. Sixth best all-time in win shares for the Wolves. Underrated player in team history. 19, Troy Hudson. Did I put him on this list only because of his great 2002-2003 playoff series against the Lakers when he had 23.5 points on 43.6% shooting for three? That maybe, but that was a great series for Troy Hudson, and came up big when they were injured at the point guard spot. 18, Isaiah Ryder. 17, Christian Laettner. Both those guys were headaches. Both of them had a lot of excuses for why the team didn't win, or maybe why they didn't show up for practice, but they could play. They could play, guys. 16, Anthony Edwards. This one's interesting. Come back in 3 years, he'll be in the top 5, I have a feeling. Come back in 10 years, he might be in the top 2, and that's saying a lot. I don't know if he'll crack the number 1 spot, because I know you know who that is, and that's a high bar to cross. But for now, a lot of his value is still kind of locked up in potential, even if we see a lot of it every game now. So Anthony Edwards, just 16 on the list, but that will go up as the years go on, I would imagine. 15, Al Jefferson. He was a nice consolation prize. They got like 18 guys in the KG trade. Big Al could play low post moves. Injuries hurt him, and they kind of went in a new direction, but he was a good player for them. He was kind of the cornerstone of that KG trade. 14, Tony Campbell. Man, those Wolves teams back in the day were bad. And he was a little bit of a volume scorer, but you know what? He scored. He had, averaged a lot of points, 23.2 in the 89-90 season. He had some good years. He deserves to be on this list. 13, Tom Gugliotta. 7 Wolves players have made an all-star team. Googs was one of them. That tells you how good he was at his peak. Unfortunately, his peak wasn't quite long enough. 12, Nikola Pekovic. Unstoppable down low when he was healthy. Would have been nice to see what he could have done with Kevin Love and Ricky Rubio if he could have stayed healthier for more years. 11, Andrew Wiggins. Now, maybe he belongs further down on this list. He's kind of hard to figure out, but he was the Rookie of the Year. He was solid, even if he never quite lived up to, the hype of being the number 1 overall pick, never became that franchise savior. 10, Terrell Brandon. He was so boring, so efficient, which is good. A lot of 17-footers off of high ball screens, but you know what? He was a good player too, and he was trying to replace the love we lost. Which, speaking of which, number 9, Stephon Marbury, he was the love we lost, traded for Terrell Brandon. Totally gutted this franchise, but for the time he was here, at least we got to experience that. 8, Sam Mitchell. Toughness. A lot of all-time leader lists that Sam's on. He deserves to be up here. 7, Ricky Rubio. Again, I'm not sure if he's that high on the list, but I think he did deserve a better fate both times around with the Wolves. He never got to play with the best core of players. Would have liked to see Ricky Rubio with better players on the Wolves. I think he would have fit with that Jimmy Butler team, but he was traded that offseason. I think he would have fit in other ways. That said, he did have plenty of time to prove himself here. So, number 7, Ricky Rubio. Number 6, Jimmy Butler. He played exactly 69 games in a Wolves uniform, but he transformed them into a playoff team. He scorched the earth on his way out, but you know what? He also wasn't wrong. 5, Sam Cassell. Very similar to Jimmy Butler. Got them over the hump, got KG to a Western Conference Finals. Number 5 in win shares per 48 minutes, so he is number 5 on this list. 4, Wally Szczerbiak. Was not a perfect player, was not a perfect fit next to Garnett, but he was a great shooter, a high-effort player, and a really good Wolf for a long time. 3, Kevin Love. 2 separate seasons for the Wolves in which he averaged at least 26 points and 12 rebounds. Maybe a little bit of that was stat stuffing, but peak Love was an unstoppable offensive force, similar to number 2, Karl Anthony Towns, who I write is still seeking a level of on-court maturity and defense in year 7 of his career. Yeah, Cat's not a young guy anymore. He's an NBA mid-career guy, but he is one of the most uniquely gifted offensive players in NBA history and deserves to be number 2 on this list. Number 1, Kevin Garnett, as if it would be anybody else. The franchise's all-time best player by a long shot. MVP one year. Got him to the playoffs 8 years in a row. He is by far the best player in franchise history and will be for a while. Like I said, maybe Anthony Edwards challenges that, especially if somewhere down the line this team experiences some playoff glory, but for now, that is how I have them all stacking up. Agree, disagree. Some people thought I left Latrell Sprewell off. I thought Sprewell was overrated. I didn't think he added that much except for some toughness and a name to that 03-04 team. Maybe I'm remembering things differently. Maybe I'm looking at his stats and thinking, he wasn't very efficient. He didn't shoot very well. Maybe there was more to it, just his presence, but I did not put him on this list. That was not an oversight. That was intentional. Some people thought Pooh Richardson. I could see that. I toyed with the idea of putting Pooh on there, but ultimately went with a different 25. Hit me with your thoughts if you want. Always on Twitter at Randball. Would love to hear from you guys about that.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Excited to have Chip Scoggins on Daily Delivery today, columnist for the Star Tribune. Does a weekly feature called Football Across Minnesota. I want to get his thoughts on his latest installment that went online Monday night, and maybe pick his brain on some Wolves, some Wild, and maybe some Gopher football too, because I believe as we record this right now, Chip is getting ready to talk to some Gopher football players as well. Now, Chip, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mikey.
Yeah, man. So FAM has been going for what, 6, 7, 8 weeks now. It feels like it's robust. It's big every week. It's got to be a challenge to put together. Tell me about the latest one and how it came together.
Yeah, I think this was week number 8, and the thing that has been rewarding, and I don't know if insightful, I think we knew there was good stories out there, but there's just so many great stories in Minnesota from the football community, whether it's high school, colleges, Gophers, smaller colleges, or at all levels. But the one this week was Eli Thomas is a grad transfer at Minnesota State Mankato, and he was nominated last week for the Football Writers Association of America. Every week they nominate a player at all levels of college football for the Courage Award, and he received it for last week. He's a linebacker, a grad transfer. In his career, you talk about overcoming adversity. He tore the ACL in his left knee 3 times. He's had. Yeah, and also, and that's, I don't know if that's the easy part, but then he also had a stroke when he was at UConn. There's cars blowing their horns in the background here.
That's okay. No worries.
He suffered a neck injury in the 1 year he could play there, and then a few weeks later he was back and was just going through. They were warming up to have a workout. They were stretching, and he started to have a stroke. He was off balance. He felt weird. The teammate that was standing next to him asked him if he was okay, and a athletic trainer happened to be right there and basically caught him. And within 5 minutes, he was on the ambulance going to the hospital. He had suffered a stroke and got transferred and had surgery on his brain to remove the clot. Doctors told the family that had it not been for the fast response of the UConn medical staff, probably would have killed him. Just because it was from the outset of his stroke until the finish of the surgery where he had the clot removed, it was only 4 hours. So it was incredibly fast and just a remarkable story. UConn and no Division I, he entered the portal because after he recovered, he wanted to keep playing. UConn would not clear him because they just had the team doctor tell the family there was so much uncertainty with concussions after a stroke, and they weren't comfortable clearing him. He was in the transfer portal, and a handful of Division I teams reached out, and then once they learned his medical history with the 3 ACL tears, they backed away and didn't offer him. But Minnesota State Mankato, Todd Hoffner, they told him they would accept him, contingent on him getting cleared, and his cardiologist, his hematologist, his neurologist, they all cleared him, and so he's playing one final year. He's 25 years old. He has a longtime girlfriend. They have 2 young kids, ages 2 and 6. And so he just wanted to have one more chance to play football, and he's the Mavericks' second leading tackle. So just a remarkable testament to his perseverance to stick with it. And he said he's just having the time of his life being able to play football again.
And that's what I love about this feature you're doing. It just gives you a chance to kind of spread your wings, write some of these stories that, maybe would be good individual columns, but they fit into this kind of overarching theme of football across Minnesota so well. So another good installment. If you haven't read it yet, go check it out. Chip, I'm sure you're full of Gopher football thoughts too, and I saw you wrote after the Maryland game about the offensive line, the defensive line. I mean, we kind of thought those would be strengths going into the year, and then maybe that didn't play out right away, but that sure is playing out now, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, that's the identity of this team, no doubt. The offensive line, I thought they were up and down early on. There'd be good moments and then some inconsistency. The last couple of weeks, they've really just dominated. And that was about as one-sided a physical matchup as I've seen in covering the Gophers, the way they just kind of pushed around Maryland along the line and created really huge, wide running lanes for those freshman running backs. But to me, Mike, the story of this team, without a doubt, 100% is the defense and the defensive line. This is the deepest defensive line I've seen in my 20 years being around the Gophers. They've had individual stars. They've had NFL players that have come from the defensive line, but 1 through 8, This is the first time I can remember them being able to roll in a true second-team line and not really have a significant drop-off. They're playing 8 guys regularly in the rotation, which I just haven't seen, and 8 guys are really contributing. And their defense, they're a top 25 defense right now in scoring in points allowed. They're only giving up 19.6 points per game. They have not finished under 20 points per game allowed since 1999. So this is something we're not used to seeing. Joe Rossi has really got that unit playing discipline. They're confident. And they don't really face any good offenses the rest of the way. The final 5 games, no real standout offenses. So this team's identity, I think we're seeing. They're really good defensively, and then the offensive line is being physical and allowing them to run the ball.
Yeah, I looked it up the other day. The last 5 games, it's 66 points total, so like 13.2 a game. You know, obviously, coming out of the chute, they gave up 45 to Ohio State. They just couldn't really match that speed in that game. But, you know, ever since then, you know, even the Bowling Green game, that wasn't on the defense. They only gave up 14 in that game. They pitched the shutout against Colorado. You know, and then last week it was you know, ball control told a lot of that story against Maryland, because I don't think they only were on the field defensively for 22, 23 minutes. But when they were getting right off the field, and that'll be, you know, it's not like the flashiest football, but when you can control both lines of scrimmage, that's recipe number 1 for winning in the Big Ten.
Well, and this is exactly what PJ doesn't. It's clear now how he wants this team to function. He doesn't care about style points or the way they do it. He wants to have high time of possession, which I think they're 5th in the country in time of possession. They're averaging 47 carries a game. So this is exactly the team, the way you've seen him play the last few weeks or since he got back in the Big Ten. This is exactly how he wants it to function. Run the ball, play good defense, ball control. But in saying that, at some point this year, and I think it's either going to be against Iowa or Wisconsin, you're not going to be able to finish a game by carrying it 23 straight times, which they did Saturday. They're going to have to be able to throw the ball and they're going to have to be aggressive. And so that's where you want to see if they can do that. If they can, at a time, if a defense rises up and stops their running game, will they trust Tanner Morgan and the receivers to go try to win a game for them or have a key drive where they have to throw the ball against better competition? And that remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple more thoughts for you. I don't know how much Wolves and Wild you've watched so far this year. I watched a lot of the Wolves game Monday night where they did not look great, lost to the previously winless Pelicans. Afterwards, Anthony Edwards was kind of critical of himself and his teammates. I don't know who he was pointing the criticism at more, himself or D'Angelo Russell or Karl Anthony Towns, but interesting to see him take on that leadership role and what his comments were basically of, you know, we got to share the ball. We were sharing the ball in the preseason, and now we're just everybody looking for their shot.
Yeah, I've seen all 3 games. I watched that one last night, and I think you're starting to see Edwards become the leader of this team because I just think he's more probably he feels more comfortable in that role than maybe Towns does in terms of that vocal, you know, being that guy. A couple things last in that game Monday night bugged me. Towns he just has to stop complaining all nonstop about this.
It drives me nuts. It drove me nuts the game before too. He fouled out because he got into that spat with Valanciunas. Like, you get the double foul, and it's so predictable. When he gets into a bad mood, he goes and charges to the basket and picks up an offensive foul.
It disrupts It disrupts his game. I think it disrupted the offense last night. And you know darn well, Mike, that is on the opponent's scouting report. Hey, you can get him off his game if, you know, be physical, if he's going to complain to the official. I mean, you know they're talking about it because we're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Just, you know, the flapping the arms at the officials. Yes, was he getting hacked? Yeah, but did the fouls, the Wolves probably fouled the other way too. It's not this great conspiracy against the Timberwolves. The other thing that bugged me, D'Angelo Russell. He's got to be more.
He was terrible.
He was terrible. I don't know if he's realizing that this is Towns and Edwards' team and he's kind of the third guy or what, but he just looked disengaged and just was taking, you know, I don't know. He's got to definitely elevate his play because last night is just not going to work.
And he looked good in the preseason. I was like, okay, preseason D'Lo, they looked, the games we saw, they looked active and engaged. And, against Houston, I think we saw the same stuff. Everything was working against Houston. The offense was fine. The defense was really good. And, everybody's going to throw a clunker out there, but I don't think they played all that well in that win over the Pelicans. They kind of got away with it. And it is nice that they're playing defense right now. I think they're fourth in defensive rating right now, that they can actually win a game or be in a game when the offense is kind of, ugly like this. But they need Russell. If Russell's not making shots, he's just such a ball stopper because he just dribbles around, looks for his spot, and a lot of times, like, the shot he winds up taking is like a contested, falling away 17-foot mid-range, and it's like, you can get that any time. Why is that the first thing we're looking for?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, if your shot's not falling, I know he's probably a volume guy where he's like, okay, the next one's going in. Do something else. Facilitate. Get someone else involved and take a back seat that night. And, you just didn't see that. And so, their offense, it hasn't been great. Early on, the season opener I was there against Houston, it was disjointed then, too, for stretches. And I think Finch had said they put so much emphasis on defense, and that, thankfully, they bought in there. At least we were seeing somebody, and that I think the offense will come and they'll smooth it out. But the defense has been encouraging, that game last night just sort of annoyed me watching it. I didn't like the body language, I didn't like the shots, I didn't like the constant complaining to the officials. It just felt like they took themselves out of that game completely. It was more of what they were doing than just more what the Pelicans were doing. I just felt like it just felt just off. I just didn't like much of anything about that game last night. Other than that spurt by Edwards was pretty good, though. You can see he gets it going, man. He is an energy player. Gosh.
Yeah, he took over that third quarter to a certain degree, almost brought them all the way back. But, it's again, and I think Edwards even talked about this post-game. They were starting to feel good about themselves. Like, we're playing the Pelicans again. We just beat them. And this is a team that just had such a hard time handling any small amount of success last year. They would win a game, then immediately lose a game. And, at least after that first Houston game, they were able to come back and beat the Pelicans. But, it's a chance to go 3-0 at the start of the year. You got to play Milwaukee now Wednesday night in Milwaukee. Like, that's not a game you're going to be expected to win. All of a sudden, like, the good feelings from a 2-0 start are going to be wiped away pretty fast if you're 2-2.
Yeah, it will. And go back to the original point with Edwards being more assertive in that post-game press conference and saying he's going to be more vocal, more kind of getting on guys. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, right? Because, he's a second-year guy, but he's a big personality, very emotional, demonstrative, and so it'll be interesting to see if he does that, if he follows through on that, and this becomes more and more, I don't say his team, but if he's kind of the guy who sets the tone for everybody else in terms of that communication, because that would require, Towns and Russell, to, hey, listen to the second-year guy, and he's jumping on them. So I'm fascinated to see how all this plays out here over the next stretch of games.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, it's kind of, in a weird way, it reminds me a little bit of the beginning of the Jimmy Butler, the good Jimmy Butler season, when he was kind of taking a back seat for a while, and they were playing okay, and he was deferring to his teammates. I think they were like, above 500, but not playing great. And then one game he was just like, all right, enough of that. Like, I'm going to start taking charge now and said as much, and they kind of took off from there. And obviously Edwards doesn't have that kind of credibility yet. He just turned 20, but, he's not afraid of that moment, not afraid of that leadership, so we'll see how far that takes him. Chip, really quick, Wild, 4-1 start to the year. Some cracks in the foundation a little bit with some of the goaltending, though. I'm just kind of wondering where this team, what's this team's ceiling? What's their floor? Was the 4-0 start, which had some, kind of not flukiness, but some resilience to it for sure, because they had to come back in some of those games, and that Jets game was a big piece of it. Like, what do you think of this team so far?
Yeah, the last game, the loss was just poor goaltending on a back-to-back by your backup goalie. I think you can say that. The first four games, I believe, right, all four of them, they didn't score first, so they had to come back, which, good news, bad news, right? You showed resilience, and you found a way to get back in it. I think they're going to be fine. I think this is a playoff team. I think they have enough scoring. I like the makeup of the team in terms of the speed that they have now. This team plays fast. I mean, Billy Guerin has brought in speed and kind of got rid of some of the old, slower guys that didn't fit the style that him and Dean Evison wants to play. So, I nothing that's really jumped out about this start sways me one way or the other. I said going in, I feel like they're a playoff team, and you start 4-1, and there's been that one hiccup there, but I feel like this team has the scoring firepower once you get Kaprizov going and Fiala going. I just feel like they should be a team that's going to be in the playoffs.
You don't think Bill Guerin would have signed Thomas Vanek?
Speedy Thomas Vanek. It is remarkable where he's had a vision of what he wants and what he doesn't want, and he has conviction in it, and if it's a unpopular decision, so be it. He doesn't care. He views it as, hey, I'm the general manager. I'm going to make this how I want. And I think, you're never perfect. Your roster never where you want it. But I do think they got some youth and some talent in the pipeline now that's coming, and they're going to need it because of the salary cap, situation they're going to be in because of the Parisi Suter contracts, that they're going to have to rely on these young guys. But I like what they're doing. I like the speed. I think they have an exciting style of hockey now. And so I think it's just a matter of, it's a long season, but avoiding the bad injuries and just kind of guys getting used to each other. But I think they're on the right path both this season and then just as Billy Guerin's, kind of blueprint for the vision for the future.
I tend to agree. Good stuff, Chip. We'll do this again soon, all right?
All right, brother. We'll see you, man.
Now, like I said at the outset, after Chip and I recorded that segment, the Wild played again, of course, on Tuesday night against Vancouver. Solid 3-2 win. Good bounce-back game for the whole team. Good bounce-back game for Cam Talbot. They kind of locked down a little bit more on the goaltending, locked down a little bit more on defense. 3-2 is a nice road win, nice road score. I believe all 5 of their wins, by the way, are one-goal affairs. So winning the close ones, a lot of them in the NHL are close ones anyway, but a good game for the Wild. Good to get back on track. And I think Chip was right. This is a solid team, and they showed that again in that game on Tuesday night at Vancouver. World Series, quickly. Atlanta 6, Houston 2 in the opener. A couple of old friends figuring reasonably prominently in this one. Eddie Rosario, 2 more hits for Atlanta, including a double and a run scored. Jake Odorizzi pitched 2 1/3 scoreless. Relief for Houston, but it didn't get them back in the game. Atlanta takes that one. That thing took 4 hours and 6 minutes, by the way. A 6-2, 9-inning baseball game. We keep talking about it. I'm just beside myself with how ridiculously long these games are. If baseball doesn't fix that, nothing they do in this collective bargaining agreement in this next offseason will really matter. They've got to fix this pace of play and length of game problem they have. Let's finish with the cooler. Interesting item, and I think I'm going to write about in Wednesday Online and Thursday's paper. Passed along to me by Kent Youngblood, our Gopher women's basketball writer. Gophers women's basketball team and Lindsay Whalen have the 7th best recruiting incoming class of 2022. So not going to help them on the court this season. That start of the year is actually right around the corner, by the way, just another 10 days away. I can't remember a Minnesota team in a sport, in basketball or football, men's or women's basketball or football, being ranked that highly in a recruiting class, and it comes from 3 players in the top 55 according to ESPN's rankings. Mara Braun, number 28 on that list. Amaya Battle, number 38, and Mallory Heyer, number 54. That's a pretty good haul for Lindsay Whalen's team. They should be should be in the mix to make the tournament this year, but watch out for next year when they could be really, really good and start to build the foundation of the program that she wants to build in this state. That'll do it for today. Thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. Good stuff coming up Thursday as well. I'm sure we'll have plenty of Bucks-Wolves talk, big game there, and, whatever else comes our way. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on Thursday.